I'd like to invite Melinda Schaller. She works from Syngenta. And I want to invite, I have to put my reading glasses on. That's why you're getting old, you know. And she's speaking alone, no Pete Johns, but he's in the audience. Okay, you are supported. Well, do you want to sit down or you want to stand at the table? Yes, good. I'll do this for you. And Melinda, it would be nice if you would like to introduce yourself, and good luck.
With music. So, hello everybody, and thank you very much for having me here today. My name is Melinda Schaller. Very good job at the last name. It's a German name, so often people get it wrong, so don't feel bad. I'm the Global Intranet and Content Manager at Syngenta Group. I actually work on the IT side, and if you've ever been to an IT conference, you'll probably understand why I had to come to a comms conference to deliver the message today. I am based in Switzerland, but the accent is Australia, so I live between two paradises. Sorry, I just realised I have a clicker. So before I get into it, just a little bit of context about who we are as a company. We're a leading science-based ag tech company. We have a mission of trying to secure the world's food supply. So we're an innovation science company at heart, and everything that we do is really around collaboration. So it's incredibly important that our collaboration tools that we have on offer really reflect that. So a little bit about what I'm going to speak to you about today. The main message that I want to deliver today is that you can, in fact, build a great intranet employee experience, digital front door, whatever you want to call it, using SharePoint Online. So I'm going to mirror a lot of the points that you said, Katarina, and hopefully not double up on them too much, and share a little bit more about our specific journey. So where do we come from? How did we get there? What were some challenges along the way? And where are we now and going to in the future? So here's a little visual journey of where we have come since probably around 2012. So the first image that you see that says way before, this was the very first intranet that was introduced at Syngenta. And it was really in that time when intranets were starting to become a thing. So it was just a blank page with lots of different links on there. And it looked very, very outdated. But for the time, I'm assured that that was actually really good. Secondly, after that, we went to launch our intranet on SharePoint 2010. So that was an on-premise solution, and it was highly customized, and it was a very, very complex system that not a lot of people knew how to work with. It required expertise, not just in-house, for which there was only a couple of people, but mainly external, so external consultancies and agencies to come and help us do anything that we needed to do on that system, because the best way to work with SharePoint 2010 was, of course, to customize it. The out-of-the-box features just were not very manageable, to say the least. Anyway, we stuck with that intranet for quite a long time because we kept building ourselves into this corner that we couldn't get out of. We had invested so much money and expertise in trying to keep that stable and viable and build upon it that we just didn't want to let it go. And then Microsoft came along and said, we're going to stop supporting it. So you can keep it, but when it breaks, which it did very, very frequently, there's going to be no way we can help you fix it. So we knew we had to do something. And at that time, the project team at the time didn't feel like SharePoint was up to the job alone. And we'd already made the switch to SharePoint Online. We kind of had two environments going, not two intranets, but two environments. But the comms team weren't convinced that SharePoint Online alone could deliver, because their experience was SharePoint 2010, which was this rigid and complex system. So we actually implemented a wrapper product, a third-party framework solution. I won't name them, but it's none of the guys that are here. And we're no longer in business with them, so that's why I wouldn't name them. But it didn't really work for us, which is why you kind of see this short leap from taking us from that wrapper product now back to a SharePoint Online out-of-the-box solution. And so I'll talk a little bit today about how we got to that and why that is the best place for us. So this is just a little bit more detail about why that project to get us off 2010 and then into the wrapper-based product wasn't really successful. The stakeholders were really more concerned with the look and feel and the design aspect because they knew what we had come from. We had come from something that was hard to design, so they were really focused on having something modern and really demonstrating to the employees that we're now in the modern era of intranets. We're leaving those old, rigid, unstable platforms behind. So they were really, really focused on the design. There was also a lack of good collaboration between the stakeholders that were involved in that project. There was HR, there was internal comms, and there was IT, and we all had quite different priorities and quite different way of looking at the project. The project didn't fail. We still launched the Intranet, and it looked good and it looked modern, but it also didn't succeed. And it was because of those reasons that I mentioned, the lack of good collaboration. But the main one was that in that project, to get us onto that wrapper project, it probably took us a year, and there was lots of different meetings and workshops and people flown in from all corners of the globe to discuss it to its nth degree. But nobody asked the users what they actually wanted when we were making this transition. So in 2022, last year, we decided that we would learn from those mistakes and that we would try to do something else. Actually, before I move on, the other reason that we had to look to do something completely different was as soon as we launched that intranet on our wrapper product, we changed our organizational structure basically overnight. We became a group, we acquired other companies, and the intranet that we had just couldn't reflect that change. Again, we had built something that was complex and rigid. The support was based in America, so it was a completely different time zone to what we were mainly working in. And it was just too hard to get the expertise in-house because of the IP that product had. So they were some of the reasons that we wanted to move off it. And we in IT knew where we wanted to go. We were really, really passionate about pushing SharePoint Online as our main platform. The reason for that was it had just come so far in its development. And we believed that all the functionalities that the previous intranet was doing, we could achieve this even better with SharePoint Online because we could bring the expertise in-house. We already had it in-house existing in the IT team that were actually managing SharePoint. By having a platform like that as well and the expertise in-house, it would enable us to adapt and change quickly to the business priorities. And for us, our business priorities change very, very quickly because we're a very seasonal-based business. Things like the war in Ukraine or weather patterns or currency fluctuations really affect how we do business and the priorities that we might have for that point in time. We need to be able to adapt quickly to show that and to show that in the culture of what we're doing. And you can't do that if you have to ring up your provider and say, make all these changes, and they charge you for the phone call and then spend 3 months trying to implement them for you. We wanted to really bring simplicity to our platform as well because, as I said with SharePoint 2010, that was so complex that it was really hard for us to make any changes, and it was really heavily customized. And so because it was so customized, every time a new feature came, the customizations would drop out, it would become unstable, sometimes it would just stop working altogether. And with SharePoint Online, it was always full availability, and there's full support there from Microsoft as well. The other point about Microsoft is that we were already paying for it, and Katarina brought this point exactly, is part of your subscription package, and your users are probably already working with it. They probably already have SharePoint pages for their departments, their locations, or whatever it might be. With SharePoint Online also, we believed that we could build a really strong foundation. So it's not that we said we'll never have a wrapper product again, but we believed that we needed to build a solid foundation that then we could build on top of. And whether that would be a wrapper product in the future or just taking advantage of some of the great new features and functionalities and products coming out from Microsoft, to be able to take full advantage of those, you have to have a solid foundation to build upon. And so that was something that we really wanted to do, strip everything back and almost start from that blank piece of paper. We also wanted to take advantage of more robust analytics, and this was really, really important because it would help us to continue to prove our business case for acting in the service of our end users and delivering what the business needs. The product that we had at the time didn't come with analytics, so it was very hard for us to tell if any of the content was working or if anything that was even on that homepage was getting any engagement. So while I said IT knew what we wanted to do and we had this great list of reasons, it wasn't easy for us to then go and convince our internal comms stakeholders. Their experience of SharePoint, as I said, was SharePoint 2010. So they came back and said to us, well, we tried it before and we know it doesn't work and we know SharePoint isn't up to the task and we've always done it this way and now we have to do it a different way. We just know it's not going to work. So it was hard to convince them because they had had such a bad experience before. So how did we go about convincing them? We got in touch with Microsoft and we said, please can we have some names of customers that you have that have done something similar so that we can talk to them and find out a little bit more about how you overcome that challenge. And one of the things that Microsoft was actually able to find us, which really turned the tide for us, was an engineer that was in Microsoft that had worked on SharePoint for 20 years. And so he'd been involved in every development phase, he knew what the roadmap was going to be, and he came into our team meeting and he did a very unsalesy overview of everything that SharePoint could give. But the most important thing that he said that really convinced our stakeholders was that you're right, SharePoint used to be terrible. We know that, and that's why we've improved it, and it's only going to get better. And from that point onwards, everything was a little bit more easy for us. We still had some other things to convince those stakeholders of, such as, well, at the end of the day, yes, SharePoint's not going to give you all these bells and whistles that these other products can give you, but our users don't necessarily care about those bells and whistles. So a little bit more detail on that and how we got to that conclusion. Main thing that we did to overcome those challenges was leverage the network, as I said, not just Microsoft, but these other companies that were in a similar position to us that we could talk to, that were doing something similar, that could come in and say to us, yes, it was hard, but we did it, or yes, we had that challenge as well, but actually it ended up being okay. But it was also people at events like this, so people that are sitting in similar positions and having those similar challenges, or people that are at any of our companies that we work with closely for any of the other tools that we have. For example, with Swoop Analytics, we've been working with them since we implemented Yammer, I think, in 2016. And in talking to them, they had customers that were also in a similar position, or they had been in roles where they had had similar issues that we were able to talk to them about. So we really leveraged them as a network as well as Microsoft, like I said. And in Microsoft, with your contract, you get a CSM. And so you can leverage that person to make other connections for you, to invite you to networking events, etc. And then so once we had proven the case with all these different conversations that we were having, bringing Microsoft into our team meeting, we could then go and prototype the solution. So we got to the point where they were convinced enough to let us spend the time and resources to go and really prove our point to them. And so we went and we prototyped and we proved, and I think we had 43 different versions of this SharePoint intranet until we finally got to the point where we could go and launch something. The other key thing for us as well in convincing internal comms was about not having a vision, but having a purpose. And a purpose is something that you're doing now. You're designing for a purpose, whereas a vision can be something that's far out in the future, or pie in the sky kind of thinking. A purpose is something that enables you to act in the service of your end users, and that's who the intranet should be for. So the end result, it took us 10 months since we got that go-ahead. Many POCs, as I said. A lot of design talks. SharePoint has the ability to let you do things in kind of a million different ways. And that is a great thing, but sometimes that can be really hard to hone in on one kind of design. So we spent a long time going through what should be on the page, what shouldn't be on the page. We spoke to a lot of end users. We held focus groups around that to really understand what people wanted to see there. But that part did take quite a long time. And we had lots of steerco meetings because at this time, this was a project and it had a steering committee above it who were making all those final big decisions about how we go forward. And so we had a lot of those meetings talking about a lot of different things. I can't even remember what they are. But we got it through and we launched our SharePoint out-of-the-box intranet at the end of last year, at the beginning of December. Now, after launch, I said at the beginning we wanted to really build a foundation so that we could continue to build on top of that. Add new features, add new functionalities, add new tools, new integrations, probably spend a little bit more time on design. But when we launched it, we did some immediate feedback surveys and some focus groups, and we were pleasantly surprised to learn that people actually liked the minimalistic approach. We stripped out the complexities, we stripped out the things that people weren't really engaging with or weren't really using anymore, and they liked that. They didn't see any business value in simply going and adding more just because we used to have that, or just because maybe it's interesting to a handful of people. They especially didn't see that we should go and spend any more time on the design, which was something that was really interesting to our internal comms colleagues who were really not happy with it looking like another SharePoint site. And they weren't interested for us to introduce yet another change. A lot of change happens in business, and we had just come out of COVID. People were returning to work. It was a hybrid working environment. There were other bigger changes going on, and they just wanted to see some stability. And this was actually some of their feedback at the time. And this was actually, it is really simplistic, and I've kept it that way for a reason, and I've just highlighted some key terms that were surprising to us as well. But the key thing was when people said it just works. They weren't used to having an intranet that was readily available, that functioned as it should, that was stable, and that was easy to navigate, that was also faster and more available, because SharePoint is a very fast solution, and when you don't build in the complexities to it, it doesn't take any time at all to load. It's there instantly, and it's available on your phone, on your iPad, in your Teams environment, on your desktop, etc. It's very, very accessible. Funnily enough, people also said it had a great look, and that's probably down to that simplicity as well. The time spent on the page in terms of the analytics that we were getting when we first launched it were really a key indicator for us as well. We'd gone from people spending about 0.3 seconds on our homepage to now spending almost 2 minutes and about 40 seconds in those first couple of days of our launch. So people wanted to engage with it because it was so easy to do so. So there was a bit of a battle in our whole project, sort of between IT and between comms. And we were working together, but we did have different perspectives. And IT, we really pushed, we need to do what end users want. And internal comms also respected that, but they had other business priorities that they need to adhere to as well. Like they want to make sure that it reflects the culture and that we can make quick changes depending on what's happening in the company at that time. So they had their idea of how it should run as well, and sometimes we did butt heads a little bit. But we came to a good happy medium, let's say, because at the end of the day, it wasn't about us or them. It was about the end users. So even though I said we thought we had a lot to do, and we were told from our end users that we don't have to really do any of that, growth is still never ever done, and the intranet shouldn't be ever done either. Because as you all know, if you've worked with SharePoint, new features and tools and functionalities come out all the time. And you want to be able to take advantage of those so that you can stay as up to date as possible. We had the experience with SharePoint 2010 when we didn't keep it up to date, the whole thing just fails. And you can't take advantage of new technology, and then the culture of your company just starts to feel really outdated as well. So even though we're not making drastic changes all the time, we're in this cycle of continuous improvement. Our intranet isn't a project anymore. We're out of the project phase, and we're looking at it from that product management angle now, which is really important. We constantly have a team behind it, and we're investing those time and resources to make sure that it is always 100% up to date and it's reflecting the changing needs of our end users as well. So we're constantly taking surveys and focus groups as well to see how we can continuously improve that. We're also looking a lot more at the data and what the data can tell us, because now we have a really good, robust analytics across our intranet. You can use the out-of-the-box SharePoint analytics as a quick fire indicator if you want to see how many people read an article, but we've actually implemented Swoop analytics for a SharePoint on our intranet, and that's able to tell us a more in-depth story about how the content is performing. How are people engaging with it, or are they engaging with it? I mean, they're not just clicking on it, are they reading it to the end? Whereabouts are they coming from? What language are they reading it in, etc. It can also tell you the health of content, so if there's lots of spelling mistakes in there, if the sentences are too long and convoluted. So this is really helpful to help inform the overall editorial strategy that helps the comm teams to decide which tool should I be posting my news on. Because we don't just have an intranet, we also have Yammer, and we also have Teams, and we also have a video channel, and there's all these other things. And this really helps us to decide what is the intranet for when it comes to news and internal comms. So some quick key takeaways in my final moments. Don't just engage your stakeholders. That was kind of our mistake with internal comms. We kept trying to engage them in our way of working and our way of thinking of it. What we needed to do was really just inspire them by telling them what's possible today, tomorrow, and in that 12 months time. And that's where Microsoft could really help us to come in and really explain to us, well, this is what it is now, but actually there's a roadmap, and this is what we're working on, and this is where it's going to get to. So there's that kind of mentality of this continuous improvement. And if you can enroll your stakeholders in that, then they won't think of it as a project anymore. You need to listen to your end users, and that really seems like a no-brainer, but you can be really caught up into the project sometimes with what your internal stakeholders think or what the business is asking for from you. But don't forget that the purpose of the internet is to be there in the service of end users. So you need to ask them what they want to see there, what they would use there, what they would engage with, etc. And bells and whistles don't necessarily equal good. We had lots of them in our framework product that we had, and it looked very nice, but it also meant that it turned off a lot of the great out-of-the-box capabilities that were already existing in SharePoint, things like search, or the ability to post external content, or the ability to have a really nice Yammer integration. So even though these things won't necessarily look as great in the out-of-the-box product as they do on those wrapper products, that doesn't matter, because the functionality and the reliability is what is key there. Frequently analyze and act. You can't do anything without good data, and you can't make a business case for making any meaningful change unless you have data and analytics that is going to back up what you're saying. You can sometimes work off anecdotal evidence or some focus groups as well, but you need to have that combined with the data to really tell the full picture of how people are interacting and engaging. Also, get out of the project phase. So many people are in an intranet project, and they think that a project has a start date and an end date. And while the project phase might have an end date, the growth shouldn't ever be done, because technology never stops growing. It never stops improving. And yeah, that's the last point. If your intranet is never done, and it definitely shouldn't be, especially in the way that we constantly change our ways of working these days. So just do it. Make a change that will be easier for your end users and help them with what they want to do at the end of the day, and that is simply work better. So that's it. I think I'm on time.
Wow, Melinda, that was a nice story.
Thank you.
And actually, I remember a question, by the way, from, I think it was Tim and Tina, and they were asked from the audience, during the process, were you ever surprised? And because you took your employees as kings, and treat them like kings, you were surprised.
Yeah.
Actually, and that's a nice thing what happened.
It was a nice surprise, exactly, because it's not often that you get told to stop working.
Yes. That was great. And I do think there are some questions. So please, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for this presentation. Do you have a video channel as
We
well?
have a video channel.
Yes, in
Yes.
your intranet.
We do. We use Cultura, which we have an internal kind of YouTube for, and we also use Stream.
Okay.
And both of those are integrated on our Intranet homepage.
How is the engagement level there from a user point of view, but also in terms of production? Does people engage with that format and produce videos to communicate in the intranet?
People, one survey that we ran, actually, we asked, how do you prefer to be communicated with? What kind of style of news do you want to see more of? And I think 70% of people said video. And then they said video or Yammer stories or Twitter-like updates. The last thing they said was a news article on the internet. But the analytics on our video platform don't actually reflect that same feedback, because when we look at videos, especially if we post a global video, so you really are posting it to the whole company, it usually has, out of 38,000 people, what good looks like on our video platform might be 128 views. So it actually is quite low. There's probably better ways to integrate it, but at the moment the strategy is a little bit, we'll do the video, but we'll also do a news story because that's the traditional way. So one of the things on our roadmap this year that we're really trying to concentrate on is really help internal comms and decide what tool to use when. So based on what end users are asking for, but what's going to be the best way of getting your message across, because it's not always that traditional intranet story. And if you're going to do a video, do the video. Don't do, and we'll do the article, and we'll do the Yammer, just in case, and we just need to get everywhere where they are because there's so many tools, let's use them all. It's about taking those data points and saying, well, what's going to be the channel to post that particular piece of news, that particular genre, whatever it might be.
Good. Another question over there.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It was super interesting. I was wondering, well, I had two questions kind of. So one is about data and analytics, right? So it sounds like you're using Swoop for most of it. I assume there's also maybe SharePoint data. So you combine the two. But do you use, for example, pulse surveys, questionnaires, or just polls, and what frequency? Do you do that with internal comms, or is it mostly IT driving it? And then I do have another question, but I'll let you answer these questions first.
All of the above, really. Our pulse survey that we have, which is the company-wide survey, usually goes every 3 years, and it's a very, very big survey and it has lots of questions in there. So what we try to do is these little tiny pulse surveys that are specific to the internet. So a poll on the homepage. Yeah, do you like this change? What's your most liked feature that you have? We do focus groups as well, where we will find people that have been commenting on articles or that have been liking articles and ask them, what engages you? And then we'll find people that haven't commented on an article or haven't liked it and say, why are you not going there? So we do those quite frequently. And we also run surveys as well, more from the IT side to see, we just ask simple open questions, things like, what could we do better? What would you like to see here? What quick link would you like to have on the homepage, for example? So we do that quite frequently because we're really still in our post-launch phase. But
really you do that through the intranet, or do you send an email?
Through the intranet.
Okay. And like hierarchization of the content, for example, you're saying that sometimes you push global content, right, like the video or whatever. But how do you have like markets that are against receiving global news? So how do you kind of govern that? Like, is there a governance structure? How do you push that? And what's the type of feedback from your markets, for example?
We really have on the top of our intranet page, I can just go to the slide actually. So in the top,
Use the clicker.
I've changed it on my iPad. In the top box of our internet, we have all the sort of global and group news. So that's the news that you really want people to see. It's the organizational news, it's changes that are happening in the company, it's things that are coming from leadership, from CEO, etc. And then underneath that, we have a news river, and that news is actually targeted to you based on your business unit and based on your location and also based on your interests. Does that answer the question?
It does, thanks.
Any more questions? Two more, I see.
Hi. Of course, 3 questions, but the first one is how do you divide the stream and Kaltura? How do they interact? We've got both as well, and we're still trying to figure out which tool to use one.
It's a tough question, but we introduced a policy last year because people were confused by the availability of both. When we implemented Kaltura, Stream wasn't as good as it kind of became. There was a lot of features that just weren't there that Kaltura could give us that Stream couldn't. So that's the reason that we implemented it. The big part of that was that you can actually share videos on Kaltura externally, and you couldn't do that in Stream. When Stream kind of started to catch up, we did see that people started using it more. So we made a distinction between what tool was for what purpose. And anything that was put on Kaltura, which we call My Videos, was videos that you would want the whole organisation to see or that you might want to share externally. So it's designed as a YouTube that you can go there and you can discover something new. Stream was, here's a place to put your Zoom recordings that one person you invited to a meeting didn't show up to and needs to watch that recording. Or it's a screen share that you've had to quickly do to solve an IT problem or something like that. It's more an archival area. And that's what we'll be using it for when we get off Stream Classic as well. That it's still for that, whereas Kaltura is very much about videos that everyone can watch and engage with and kind of learn something new.
Super good. And then the second question, I'll skip the third, is when you move from SharePoint 2010 to the new CMS and then back to SharePoint Online, did you do these migrations with the vendor? How was the migration done? And the end users, how did they adapt to the changes?
So good question, because when we went from SharePoint 2010 to this framework solution, they were going to help us with the migration, but because our system was so old and full of complexity, we couldn't do a migration and achieve a nice result. So what we ended up doing was just migrating everything to SharePoint Online, which was the backbone of that framework product anyway. And the framework product really just sat over the top. So we did the migration to SharePoint Online with the intention that that was now up to date. Once we launched, let's put it into this new system, but we never actually got there because we could never get it working 100% because of some of the functionality and the complexities that we had built into it. How did the user adapt to that change? At that time, the SharePoint 2010 environment was actually pretty small as well. We took over about 80 what we call communication sites, so that were there for everyone to access. And we had 15,000 team sites, so that was a little bit more complex. But that didn't change when we changed to SharePoint Online because we were really changing that front end. So it was a pretty easy journey, actually.
1 minute left, or even less. This lady over here. As the last question, please.
Thank you. Thanks very much for great insights and really sort of succinct takeaways as well. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your content strategy and especially the user-generated content as opposed to the centrally generated content. What's your approach? How do you manage that side?
So we do have an internal comms team who are responsible for the high-level content. So they work with the leaders and they're posting announcements and news from CEO, the leadership, etc. But we've democratized our intranet in a way that there are lots of people out there contributing content from their business units, from their teams, because not every country, every function has an internal comms person. We don't put too much governance around it in the sense that you're not internal comms, so you can't go on the homepage or whatever. The news is targeted. It's going to get to the targeted audience. Therefore, it's up to them to decide. And we all kind of work in peace and harmony, if you like. But we do have a monthly call that we have in a Teams that we have set up where we bring all those editors together, all these content contributors together, and we do just discuss frequently about what content should go where, about what platform it might work best on, and there is a conversation about it, so we don't have one group owning it. We kind of all own it together in that sense.
Good. Thank you so much, Melinda.